there are a number of different views about Brexit. I have a very clear post-Brexit vision of Britain, as does the Prime Minister, and it's one where we sit alongside Europe as close friends with tariff and quota-free access. Very important, we have very strong relationships. Europe is, Spain, one of our biggest trading partners, but also we sit atop a geostrategic web of trading relationships. So I'm spending my time working with Kemi Badenoch, my Secretary of State, to do trade deals with countries like India, the CPTPP, Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, Israel, Switzerland, which will mean if you are a manufacturing or large services business, the only country in the world where you'll have these sorts of trading relationships and tariff-free opportunities will be the UK. So in my view, that gives an enormous investment lead to my country over the next few years as people realise the opportunities that they can garner when locating in Britain.
How toxic could a final deal be today, though, for the Tories, given that number 10 has been a revolving door in recent years?
Well, I think we now have a very strong and stable government. We've got a Prime Minister and a Chancellor who are business people. They come with a strong business background, which from my point of view as investment minister is very important. He's doing the right things. He's made some important machinery of government changes, for example, in my own department. He's trying to get a resolution in Northern Ireland, which again is the right thing to do. And he's pushing our global trade agenda. So my view is we're doing all the right things, and I hope very much that we'll get the cross-party support in order to enable us to achieve our mandate.
Let me ask you more about technology, given we're at this big conference. You've mentioned some of the areas where the UK can lead and is leading around nuclear, semiconductor, clean energy, life sciences. But only just weeks ago, the Sanofi boss accused the UK government of putting budget discipline first ahead of investment. What do you say to that?
Well, listen, this is really important. Investment depends upon the cost of capital. If your cost of capital is too high, then your investment case is effectively eradicated. So what Jeremy Hunt has done is he came in as Chancellor and he had to stabilise the situation. Nothing mattered more than a strong currency and a low rate of inflation and thus low interest rates. And that's what we've done. And I would say we're the only government in the world that's really concentrating on budget discipline, because that means our cost of capital is much lower, which makes the country fundamentally more investable. So one, get your cost of capital down and stabilise the economy, and then two, focus on investment. And I would just say one thing, people are talking down the UK economy. But a few weeks ago, we peaked we reached the highest peak ever in terms of inward investment, over £2 trillion. We're the fastest growing country in terms of tech startup capital other than the US. Now that's ahead of India and China and countries like that. So in real terms, in terms of FDI, people are liking the message that the government are putting out. They're liking our fundamental policies, and actually really importantly, they're liking the businesses, some of which are represented here today, these fast growing, innovative businesses run by British entrepreneurs in the UK.
One concern, though, is that fiscal stimulus could accelerate some countries over others, namely the United States with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, also a European response that has been discussed as we speak. The fact that we're not part of Europe now, doesn't that hamper the UK's ability to accelerate in this area when so much firepower is being thrown at these new industries?
Well, I think the first point is the flexibility that we have outside Europe will actually enable us to be a greater fulcrum for world trade. So that's one very important point that people aren't really baking into their sort of, investment equation. The second point is the Inflation Reduction Act. I don't think it reduces inflation. I think it's relatively protectionist. And yes, whilst it's valuable in some development areas, I don't think it's as powerful as maybe people see. What's more important is you have a strong investment climate. So you have the regulatory alignment. You have the people. You have the government support, which we still have when it comes to startup and technology companies. So yes, it's an issue. I think we have to be aware of it. We have to work with America and our partners. But ultimately, trying to just come up with a so-called bigger bazooka isn't what's going to give the UK competitiveness compared to other nations.
So the UK is not going to come up with its own subsidies to try and compete?
Well, we already have, and extremely broad. I mean, we're 20 billion of R&D a year invested by the UK, either directly or through other types of credits and grants. I mean, it's a huge amount that we put into this area, and so the government's doing a lot. What's important is you have around that the global trading system that enables these countries to compete, and you have a good regulatory structure that encourages, liquidity in the City of London. And I would refer you to the Edinburgh reforms. I don't know if you've talked about those, but they are really valuable because they put competitiveness back onto the regulator, which helps grow those financial services sectors, and it also liberalises a lot of the money that's previously been allocated to treasuries, and that can go into venture, private equity, less liquid investments, unlisted, and infrastructure. So we're doing the true things that will make a real long-term difference to the economy. And it's not just, it's not just about spending huge amounts of money. Business comes from entrepreneurs building their own companies, and government needs to assist them, but it can't stand in for them.
The chip industry says you're not doing enough. They want a semiconductor strategy. We spoke to Pragmatic Semiconductor in Cambridge recently. They say they may be forced to relocate overseas if the government doesn't issue an industry plan soon. Is one coming, and what will it look like?
Okay, well, I've got a lot of sympathy with this area, because I think semiconductors is a really important area for the UK. We have some extraordinary specific skill sets that will give us enormous global dominance and also give us resilience. The government is working on a semiconductor strategy. These things take time. We want to get it right. You know, a lot of the discussions I've had today in this conference are about the future. You know, we do not know what technologies are going to be dominant and how we're going to manage it. So we're working on it. We definitely see it as a core priority. And from my point of view as investment minister, it's certainly something I've spent a lot of time working on. So, you know, I hope I can give positive news in the near future.
The UK in the past let the jewel in the crown go, ARM, to semiconductor. It is now slated for an IPO later this year. Does the UK have a shot at luring ARM back to the big board?
Well, my view is that London is the capital of liquid markets in the world. And if we get our trade deals right, it will become even more of a funnel for capital into countries like India if we can get our alliances right there. So I'm hoping that every company in the world will see London either as a primary listing or as relevantly as a secondary or dual listing, because we've got the investment management talent in London. We have this extraordinary ecosystem of hedge funds and small specialist boutiques, which I fully admit, conflict of interest, I came from, although I'm not involved anymore in that. And I saw the power, the intellectual firepower that we have in London. So yes, the US is the biggest capital market in the world, but the biggest international investment market in the world is London, because that's where the people are and the liquidity is. So, you know, I call everyone to come to the UK, list in London and benefit from our financial services ecosystem.
AI is seen as the future, and the US is trying to tackle the Chinese on this and accelerate past the Chinese. Already the buzz has been around generative AI. The US has its models through the likes of Microsoft and Google. China has its own Ernie bot. There is talk that there should be some investment. This came from the BT chief saying that the government needed to invest in large language models. We need our own Brit GPT.
Okay, well that's interesting. I mean, through the British Business Bank and Patient Capital, we're already investing many billions. In fact, the government is the biggest venture capital investor in the UK and UK businesses. And there is a huge amount of money out there for R&D, as I say. You know, we're looking at billions a year committed either through tax credits, other incentives or grants. So we're putting a lot of money into this area. What I'm impressed by is the government's forward thinking when it comes to these new technologies. AI is one, but fusion is another. Again, through our regulatory focus, we've managed to create an entire industry way ahead of even the United States. So we're pushing hard. Can we do more? Yes. Can I try and get more investment into these innovative technologies? Yes, I can, and that's why I'm here, you know, selling these great opportunities.
And finally, let me ask you about Chinese spy balloons and surveillance, because we clearly have issues around Huawei still. The networks have warned about potential outages if there was an extension to the deadline to later this year around Huawei. Given now what we know around the surveillance using various balloons, how would you say we are progressing through this tech fight with the Chinese around security concerns?
Well, I would rather look positively at tech. I think it gives huge benefits to humanity, and it's going to change our lives as it already is. And there's an amazing house, I don't know if you know Barcelona well, but there's an amazing house here which has the 4 great technologies of the time in 1920s, like an electric light bulb, a gramophone, and a combustion engine. Not much has changed actually in the last 110 years. In the last 10 years things have changed enormously with concepts such as AI, possibilities of quantum, concepts such as fusion. And now we're looking at whole new worlds of the metaverse, how we can have technology that sort of absorbs our neural pathways and the risks that carries in terms of how computers could try and control us or know more about our emotions and sentiments. So, you know, my view is the OECD Tech Forum that we've just instigated, I've just given a press conference on it, is exactly this. It's a forum that will discuss how we have safe and democratic and liberal technologies of the future. And I would welcome China and all countries to join those forums so that we collectively can say, how can we use this technology not to control us, not to spy on each other, but to genuinely give us longer, happier lives. And that's what we're trying to do in the UK to lead the way on.